Today I'm going to be showing you how to go from this to this and then back to this. What's up guys, and welcome back to another Tech Tip Tuesday, where we show you tips on how to work on your bike as well as tips to be an overall better BMX racer. If you're not a BMXer and you're watching this video, have you ever wondered how a BMXer gets their bike to an event if they're flying there? And if you are a BMXer and you're flying somewhere and you're not quite sure how to get your bike there the best way possible, well, in this video I'm going to show you the most common and most cost-efficient way to get your bike to your destination if you are flying. Just keep in mind the method I'm going to be using today is for a 20-inch bicycle. Once you start getting into the bigger wheel sizes, that's when you have to get the specialty cases that fit your specific bike, a mountain bike, a road bike, even a cruiser. Now that we got that cleared up, the most common way and most cost-efficient way to get your 20-inch bicycle to your destination is to take off the front end, take off the pedals, and put it into a golf bag. So there's a couple reasons why this method is so popular, and that's because one, golf clubs fly free and bikes don't. A lot of times the airlines will look at the bag and they will just automatically assume that there's golf clubs inside of that case. And two, because it's so compact and your bike fits perfectly in this little slim case and you don't have to roll around this big gigantic box wherever you go. So this way can be kind of tricky because all of those parts that you took off of your bike have to go into that bag, and you have to strategically put them around your bike and wrap them so that way none of your parts are getting damaged or even falling out of the bag if they unzip it and check it. And for the moms out there that are flying with their kids, dad took the bike apart, put it in the bag, he couldn't make it. Well, I'm going to show you how to unpack it and put it back together so that way you don't have to worry about little Johnny ripping the handlebars coming out of the gate. So enough of this talking because my jaw hurts. Let's put the bike in the golf case. So first things first, before I even put my bike into the bag, I like to make sure it's nice and clean, because that way when I get there and I take it out of the bag and put it back together, it's already clean, I'm ready to go. So there's a bunch of different things that you can stuff in your bag with your bike to protect it. I like to use old blankets and old towels just to stuff in there and protect my bike. You can use bubble wrap, some people even use foam. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take out all of my blankets out of my bag, lay them out so that way when I have all the parts off of my bike, I can lay them on the blankets, wrap them up, get them ready to put in the bag. First things first, unbolt and take off the front wheel. Next up, disconnect the brakes completely so you can take the front end apart. Once I have the front cable pulled out of the brake lever, I like to hook these back up so they don't get caught on anything and get damaged. Okay, now that we have the brakes disconnected, we can loosen up the stem, pull off the handlebars, drop the forks. Okay, now, before you start going crazy, pulling off all these spacers and stuff, just remember where they went, because you have some on the top, and in most cases you have some on the bottom. I have a trick to remember that. Alright, now this is what I was talking about. Top screw, top spacers, bottom spacers, dust cap, top bearings. Now the bottom bearings in my frame fit nice and snug, so I don't worry about pulling those out. Now let's slip these back onto the forks in order. Now the reason I do this is because one, I can remember exactly where they went, and two, so that way they don't get lost, because these are very important. You need these, and you don't want to get to a race and not have these, because then you have to go to the track and hope there's a vendor there that you can get spacers. Okay, so now we're at this point and we have this flappy cable. what do we do? So there's a couple things you can do. You can pull it around like this and shove it through the other side of the cable if it's being held, and that way it won't flap around. Or you can fold it around here, put a strap or a temporary zip tie. Or what I like to do, get the dead end of it, put it in the steer tube, fish it through the top all the way. Now you have a temporary hold of it. Bada bing, bada boom, baby. Next up, take off your pedals. All right, now that I pretty much have all the components off of the bike, I have my pedals, my pedal washers, the spindle that goes through the front hub. I don't like to keep this in the hub because it rattles around, and that's just another thing that could be damaged. I have the bare minimum tools that I'll need to put my bike back together. Pretty much all my bike requires is Allen wrenches. And then I like to put them into a Ziploc bag, what will fit. And then I put whatever's remaining all together in a grocery bag, tie it up, put it in my bag so that way I don't have to worry about it falling out or getting lost. Okay, now everything is pretty much taken off of the bike. We have the pedals taken off. We have the entire front end taken off. Now, some people like to leave their seat on before they put it into the bag. I like to take it off because it just kind of gets in the way and it's harder to zip up the bag. So I also forgot to mention that when I take my bike apart and when I'm getting ready to put it into the bag, I like to let all of the air out of the tires. That way it fits into the bag easier. And I don't know if it's because of the elevation or what, but I remember I unpacked my bag one time and I didn't let the air out and I had a flat tire. So I don't know if it was from them throwing it around or if it just popped. So for the frame and the back tire part of the bike, I like to lay out my biggest blanket so that way I can just lay it on one side and roll it up like a Tootsie Roll. Also, I should mention that when you lay it out on the blanket or foam or whatever bubble wrap, make sure the cranks are nice and level so that way when you go to put it in the bag, they're not getting in the way and binding up the zippers. Alright, so now that we pretty much have all the important things wrapped up in blankets, the front wheel, the frame, I put the handlebars and forks in the same blanket just so they're not two separate things. I like to lay out a blanket first and then I can start shoving stuff in, and then once I'm done I can wrap it and then I can stuff blankets everywhere else. Once I have this bigger blanket laid in there, then I can put the back wheel in first and then the frame on the top of the bag. So for the front wheel, since the bottom of the bag is the widest part, I put the front wheel on top of the back wheel. And when you do that, make sure there's nothing binding or hitting each other because that will cause damage because they just throw our bags into the plane and they don't care what is inside. So once you have the frame, the back wheel, and the front wheel put in, you might have to play around with it a little bit so you can fit it in here, make sure nothing is hitting each other, and the bag will zip back up. So now I have everything I need put into the bag. I put the seat in and then I put my little bag of tools. I have some extra blankets right here. That way I can just shove them in all these extra empty spaces, cover any parts that I think might get damaged, and then we can just zip it up. All right, we got everything in the bag. We got extra blankets, extra towels. Had to mess with it a little bit to get it to zip up. Like I said, especially if it's your first time doing it, you might have to play around with things and move it a little bit, but it will fit. All right, so at the beginning of the video, I promised all the moms that I would show them how to put the bike back together safely. So let's pretend we just got to our destination. We have this bag. We don't know how to put it back together. Let's open it up and put it back together. Okay, so when you open up this bag, just be mindful of kind of the way it was packed, because that will come in handy when you go to put it back into the bike bag. Alright, so now that you have everything out of the bag, you have all these parts just kind of laid out, not really sure how they go. We're gonna work on the floor like you're in the hotel room or you're even at the track. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna build the front end. We're gonna grab the handlebars and the forks. So the handlebars, I'm sure you know what handlebars are, and then the forks. Hopefully Dad's cool like me and put everything kind of in the order that it's gonna go on the bike. So take all the spacers and bearings off of the fork and lay them out how you think they should go back onto the bike. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do, make sure either the bearing is on the fork or the bearing is inside of the frame. Slip the forks into the frame. Then you can kind of put it on the floor and it'll balance by itself. Now you can take your bearings and start putting the front end back together. Dust cap, spacer that goes below the handlebars. Now you can put the handlebars on, spacers that go on top of the stem. Now you can screw in the top cap. Now don't tighten the front end too tight just yet until you have the front wheel on and stuff, because little Johnny might like to look at it and adjust it himself. Now if Dad is cool like me, he would have connected the brakes. So make sure just to disconnect them so we can hook them back up to the lever. Now, when you're putting this cable back into the lever, first thing you're gonna wanna do is pull the lever a little bit back. You can see the little hole. Line up the cable, slip that in. And then the next thing, you're gonna wanna pull it back a little bit. And this little screw has a little space in it that you wanna line up perfectly, and the cable will slip right in. Just like that. And again, don't tighten this up too tight yet because little Johnny might like to adjust his brakes himself. Once the cable is back into the lever, then you can hook up the back brakes. Once we have the brakes all put back together, we can slip the seat in and then we can flip it over, put the front wheel on, and then put the pedals on. Okay, now that we have the bike flipped upside down, we're ready to put the front wheel on. Now be careful because a lot of these new tires are directional and you don't want to put it on backwards because little Johnny will let you know. My best tip to putting them on the right way is to get above the bike looking this way towards the back wheel and then figure out which way the tread should be going and face it towards the back wheel. Get your spindle if the hubs have a spindle. Slip that in, get the other bolt. Okay, now that you have the front wheel on, you're gonna wanna make sure that this is tight because you don't want this to fall off and then little Johnny smash his face into the next jump. Then you'd have to take little Johnny to the hospital. And finally, now you're ready to put the pedals on. Some of these pedals will come with an R and an L. L for left, R for right. I don't really have a tip to putting these on. It's pretty much self-explanatory. If the pedal won't go on a crank, try the other crank. It'll probably go on. Another thing to keep in mind, if you have an extra set of washers and you're not really sure what they are, they might be the pedal washers. Some cranks require pedal washers, DXRs, speed lines. Make sure you put those onto the pedal before you put them on the bike. Alright, now that you have the bike put together, the front end is snug, the brakes are snug, now you can call little Johnny over. He can set up his handlebars the way he wants it, he can adjust the brakes the way he wants it, and then you can come back and you can tighten everything down, go over the bike, make sure nothing's gonna fall off, take him to the track. And if the tires are flat or they're low, you can pretty much find a bike pump anywhere you go. And if you're really that worried about it, you can just throw your bike pump into your bag. No big deal. Mommy, can you loosen my handlebars? They're crooked. Alright guys, that's a wrap on this week's Tech Tip Tuesday. If you liked it and you learned something new, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, please don't give it a thumbs down because that will hurt my feelings and it might hurt the channel. Again, thank you for hanging out with me. I'll see you next week. Ah, barbecue sauce. Of course there would be a plane flying over right now. Ooh, text from Bill Ryan. You're fired.